think many of you come into church and you're even questioning, like, who is this man? This man who never wrote a book, but has been subject to more literature than anyone in history. This man who was the furthest thing from royalty, but before him, more knees have bowed than any other king or leader. This man who never got a degree, no PhD, yet his teachings have influenced more people than anyone else in any field. This man who never sang a song, yet there have been more songs written about him in worship to him than anyone else. This man who never posed for a photograph, yet his picture is the most famous image that has been subject to many artwork around the world like nobody else. And just a quick side note, he don't got blue eyes and blonde hair. Just quick caveat to that. We're going to tell the truth around here. This man whose life was cut tragically short, and his life, when he died, it literally split time. The timeline of how we mark history is split between BC and AD because of this man. So who is he? Is he the greatest man who ever lived? Is he more than just a man? Is he simply the spellbinder behind history's most exceptional ruse and trick? Who is this Jesus? And is he worth paying attention to? And I would argue that he is worthy of worship. And if you don't understand what worship is, what do you give your attention and affections to? Because every single one of us in here is worshiping something or someone. And if you don't know, maybe it's you that you worship. But every single one of us in here is giving our attention to something. And I just want to say, I believe, this church believes, that Jesus is worth all of your attention. Simply worth all of your attention. But here's the thing. I am not here to try to convince you by way of argument. Because if I argue you into believing in Jesus, then a better argument will get you to not believe in Jesus. I'm here to show you real evidence, to point you to the greatest person that ever lived, and you get to decide, you get to investigate if he is worth following. Now, I want you to imagine for a second here that you get a letter from a official law firm in the mail. It's got that law firm letterhead, and that bad boy is thick too. Right? Because they got money, okay? And you know it's not a scam because you know scammers ain't paying for thick letterhead, right? But we do live in a world where there are a lot of scams, and so I imagine some of you would be a little hesitant, right? Like, I feel like every 3 days I'm getting a text message from someone who's telling me that they got my Amazon package, or from someone who's like, did you know that if we invest in this, you can win? I'm like, how do these people get my money? And then what's getting even crazier is, I don't know if y'all have ever been scammed out by one of these scammers that pretends to be a pastor. They'll send you messages on Facebook or Instagram, and the DM goes something like this. Hey there, highly favored servant of God. I was sitting here in my prayer lounge, and I have been too busy praying, and I need you to help me pay something. And people be sending them money. Scams. Many of you are skeptical because the world is full of scams. But what if you got this legal letter from a law office that said that there was a distant relative from somewhere who had passed away and was leaving you tens and millions of dollars? Some of y'all are like, look, I don't care who it was. I'm 23andMe right now. I'm about to find out who. Yeah, I want to make sure. You would investigate it because the offer is too much to pass up. What I believe and what I'm trying to tell you today is that the offer of life that Jesus is offering is too good to pass up. You need to investigate it. You need to search, like Google. Oh my gosh, there's so many things that we have now, resources to our disposal that bear evidence that this God is true and real. The offer is too great for you not to look into it if you don't believe. And if you don't believe in Jesus, if you don't get this whole church thing, but you were drug here, man, we're glad you're here. And we want to say this is a place for you to investigate. Because I just simply believe that the life that Jesus has to offer is not simply just saving you from this afterlife called hell. Man, he's offering you life that gives purpose, that gives meaning, that when you wake up every day, you don't wake up looking for approval. You wake up approved already by God, that he gives you purpose and meaning. This life is for you, but you need to decide. And so I believe the story of Jesus can radically change your life. And I believe that this story that we are talking about today, where billions of followers of Jesus are gathering around to hear the greatest story ever told, and this story will intersect with your life. It has everything to do with this. Recently, a couple years ago, I was at the movie theaters and I was watching part of the Avengers, series, right? And man, I was feeling some type of way at the end of it. I'll tell you a little bit more later. But, the movie ends and I get up out of my seat and I start walking, and this little teenage boy grabs my pants and was like, "Hey, excuse me, where are you going?" And first I looked at him like, "Brother, I ain't your daddy. Why are you grabbing me like this?" Like my Moreno Valley side about to come out. You know the place they call the murder? That's about to come out right now. I'm like, this boy grabbing me. And then he says, no, I don't think you understand. He says, in these movies, there's always another scene. And so I sit down. And I think that picture, as I was processing this message, is very true for some of you in here today. Is that the credits on your life are metaphorically rolling. It's still dark. There's no light. And all of a sudden, you feel like you are about to give up on life. You are about to give up on that marriage. You're about to give up on that child. You're about to give up on that relationship. You are about to give up because the credits are rolling and you think that it's over. But can I tell you today that the story that we're about to talk about is got another scene. And this other scene, when we look at it, it's an empty tomb. And because there's an empty tomb, that means that we serve a God of the impossible. So the addiction that you're struggling with, the marriage that you're struggling with, the relationships that you're struggling with, the pornography that you cannot kick, all of those things fall subject to Jesus. And he can do the impossible. So my encouragement today is that you stick around, because I promise you there's another scene. Amen. So the scene that we are going to talk about, the scene that I believe where the story starts, where your life can intersect with this story, starts in Luke 24. Starting in verse 1, it says, on the first day of the week, very early in the morning, the women took the spices they had prepared and went to the tomb. Here's a quick caveat why they did this. You see, the day before, the men took Jesus to the tomb, and the women were like, y'all women in here know why these women are going. Is because the men, they were supposed to do something, but they didn't clean that bad boy up right. So now the women all of a sudden got to come onto the scene. And some of y'all women in here are already shaking your head because, yep, I know what it's like to tell my man to clean the kitchen. And he said, oh, baby, it's clean. And then you wake up in the morning. I could testify. I've been there. Y'all forgot to wipe the counters. Y'all forgot something. And so now she woke up and she got to clean up. She got to clean up the cleanup. Well, the ladies are here, the women are here cleaning up the cleanup. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb. When they entered, they did not find the body of the Lord Jesus. While they were wondering about this, suddenly 2 men in clothes that gleamed like lightning stood beside them. In their fright, the women bowed down with their faces to the ground, but the men said to them, look, phenomenal question. Why do you look for the living among the dead? That's a whole nother sermon I wish I could preach right now. Why do you look for life in dead things? Why do you look for life in things like sex, stuff, and status when Jesus says, I got the keys to life? See, this is a whole other bar that someone needed to hear today, that God wants you to stop looking for life in dead things. And can I tell you, the only thing that satisfies, the only thing that will give you life is Jesus. It says, he is not here. He is risen. Remember how he told you. Hold on to that. While he was still here with you in Galilee, the Son of Man must be delivered over to the hands of sinners, be crucified, and on the third day be raised again. He says, remember how he told you. Real talk. How did you miss this? He had been talking about this all throughout Jesus' life on earth when he traveled many times. And I'm just going to give us 3. He told them that this would happen. In Matthew 16, it says, from that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and on the third day be raised to life. Luke 9:44, he says, listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you. The Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men. Luke 18, verse 31, Jesus took the 12 aside and told them, we are going to Jerusalem. Everything that has been written by the prophets about me will be fulfilled. I will be delivered over to the Gentiles. They will mock me, insult me, spit on me, flog me, and kill me. And guess what? On the third day, I'm getting up. He told them, and he told them, and he told them, and he told them. But here they are. They doubted even as he went to the cross. And they're still doubting right now. Like the angels are looking like, yo, he told you that he was going to die and in 3 days raise up. Like we came down here thinking y'all would be standing outside the tomb like, yo, 10, 9, 8, 7, move that rock. Like they was ready. They thought y'all would have been ready. He told you this. But none of you were there at the tomb, just like you weren't there for him at the cross. And so here, Jesus is getting at the very thing that I think, the story of Jesus here is getting at something that I think is so important for us to understand. They heard about Jesus, they did things for Jesus, and they missed Jesus the whole time. Many people will show up to church. You will do the Jesus thing, put on the Jesus shirt, say the Jesus thing, whatever. You will do a lot of things for Jesus, and you will get to one day in your life where you meet him, and it says in Matthew 7, verse 23, I never knew you. I never knew you. And here's the reality. The way that I think Christianity is set up in America is that you could simply be a biannual believer. And can I tell you that we serve a God who is not looking for biannual believers. He's looking for everyday followers. He's not looking for people to just show up at Easter and Christmas and be like, cool, we did the thing. We gave a little bit of money. We did this thing. No, he's looking for people who will reorient their life, change the direction that they are going and say, I choose to follow him. You could do a lot of things in the name of Jesus. You can know a lot about Jesus and still not know Jesus. You've never practiced. You never practiced your faith. This is why our goals are for people to see Jesus, be with Jesus, become like Jesus, and do what Jesus did. And for some of you, I don't want you to feel, and none of us, like saying this whole thing of how Jesus wants biannual, or he wants everyday followers, not biannual believers, is not to shame us, it's to challenge us. Some of you, I get it. You don't know what this thing's about. You've never been told like you've never sat down with someone or heard a real explanation of like, what is this thing about following Jesus actually like? Or maybe you've actually heard people talk the talk, but they've never walked the walk. And so you're confused and maybe frustrated. I think maybe some of you are even navigating trauma that the church has done to you. Yes, as a pastor, I am supposed to say things that I hope would convict you. And when I use that word, it's to help you orient your life back to Jesus. I have to say it to myself before I say it to you. I have to try and live it myself before I ask you to do it. But the problem is many of you have sat in churches and heard pastors who have manipulated God's word and spiritually abused you. And so you're like, yo, all I got is biannual. I can't step in those places. And I just want to tell you, if no Christian or church or pastor has ever apologized to you, can I just apologize on their behalf? I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you got a picture of Jesus that was more like a landlord than Lord. I'm sorry that you got a picture of Jesus whose arms were crossed when you messed up instead of arms wide open waiting for you to come home. I'm sorry you got that picture. But I pray that you get a renewed one here. And my prayer is that you don't allow sinful people to keep you from a sinless God. That you don't allow sinful people to keep you from seeing the beauty and majesty of Jesus. This whole idea of sin is the absence of God's goodness. It is people doing things, putting themselves in the center and not Jesus, treating people poorly, lying, stealing, killing, destroying, dehumanizing. Sin is absent of God's goodness. And the reality is, sin is in all of us. It is done to us, and sin is around us. It's just a thing that we have to navigate. But the good news of the story is this. In 2 Corinthians 5:21, it says that God made him who had knew no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. What this means is that you and I, if we were to pull out our track record of sin, the ways in which we have not lived like Jesus and mistreated other people, if I were to unpack that scroll would roll all the way down and that mug would keep on rolling. But Jesus says, listen, let me show you my track record. Spotless. You know what? I'm just not going to forgive you of it. We are going to trade. And I'm going to take all of your sin, all of your shame, all of the evil things that you've done, and I took it to the cross. It's what we call the great exchange. Jesus hit select all on your sins. He didn't just delete a sentence. He went Control A. Some of y'all in school, y'all know what Control A does, right? That mug select the whole thing. And he said, delete. He didn't even leave a line. He didn't even leave a word. He didn't leave a period. He said, I'm deleting all of it. And I'm not going to make you earn it because it's grace. It is grace. Many of you come into places like this in the church and you feel like, oh man, I got to have it all together. I can't have any doubts. Can I encourage you real quick? It says when they came back to the tomb, they told these things to the 11 and to all the others. And it was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary, the mother of James, and the others with them who told this to the disciples. But listen to what it says. But they did not believe the women because their words seemed like nonsense. Can I tell you something? If you here are not a follower of Jesus and you have doubts, you make a great disciple of Jesus. The disciples were Jesus' students. They were his apprentices. All of them had doubts. You want to know why we know they had doubts? It's because they never showed up for him when it really counted. And they didn't believe the words that he had been telling them the whole time. So if you are here and you're doubting, you actually can that's a great entry point into being a disciple of Jesus. You don't know it all. So you want to follow him. Faith is not having all your questions answered and your ability to explain everything. Some of you think you got to have perfect faith before you start this thing. That's not how it works. Faith is when the unexplainable meets the undeniable of the resurrection. It's when you look at all the questions that you have in life and that the answers are there found in Jesus. And I think one of the challenging things is you step into places like the church and you think, oh man, these people got it all figured out. They got it all together. And can I tell you that we don't? We're just a bunch of nobodies trying to tell somebody about a guy who saved us, who redeemed us, who gave us new life. We are not the heroes. It's Jesus. But I want to make a claim because there is evidence. Like when you think about it rationally, when you think about this whole claim, there's actual factual evidence. One of them, there's a second century philosopher. He was one of the first to attack Christianity. And the way in which he attacked Christianity was he wrote about the women. And many people, this is their attack against Christianity here. And ladies, don't throw your shoe at me. This is not me. I did not co-sign this. I'm simply putting it for a little bit of shock value, but for you to understand what people believed. Listen to what this Celsus, Greek philosopher who hated Christianity, wrote one of the first attacks on Christianity, said about his attack. He said, how can anyone expect rational men to listen to the testimony of a hysterical female? Do you know why he did that? And do you know why it was considered that this was not true? It's because in that culture, it was a very misogynistic culture. Women didn't have values. They didn't have rights. They were seen as lesser than. Literally, historians who have done all the research to say that this is true, they say, why on earth would you make up a true story and have women be the witnesses? Why would you do that in this culture? It doesn't make sense unless it was actually the women who were there. In every account in the gospel, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, it is the women who are there first. It is the women who came, and it was the women who God would use to be witnesses because Jesus' kingdom is upside down. He doesn't operate how people operate. It was the women who were the witnesses. Consider Paul, who's used to be called Saul, and Saul was he was one of the main culprits in killing Christians, trying to stop this movement of Jesus. How is it that Saul, in 1 Corinthians 15, now Paul is writing and testifying in a public document 20 years after Jesus raised from the dead, talking about over 500 witnesses who saw him? Like, what does he have to gain? He's actually going to look more silly because he was known as a guy who was persecuting them. And now, all of a sudden, you mean to tell me that he's testifying? He is telling people publicly about this Jesus who raised from the dead and 500 other people saw him? If that doesn't get you, think about 11 out of 11 disciples, those who followed Jesus, those who doubted, those who didn't believe at this moment. Every single one of them died for their belief that Jesus raised from the dead. Peter was crucified upside down. He did not want to be crucified right side up because he didn't feel worthy to be crucified like Jesus. This was the same Peter that denied Jesus 3 times as he was going to the cross. How does he, of all people, go from denying him to dying for him? He saw him. The other disciples, James, son of Zebedee, was beheaded. Matthew was burned at the stake. The other Peter was crucified in what we know as modern day Turkey. Do you think Matthew was sitting there getting burned at the stake like, man, I really hope this thing was true? He was getting burned because he knew that he saw the risen Jesus. And he knew and he believed that Jesus' words that one day he would be with him in paradise. That this life does not end on earth, but it ends in heaven. He knew that. James was thrown from a temple and didn't die, but then was beat to death with clubs. Here's the thing. People will die for things that are not true if they think they are true. But people do not die for things they know are not true. People do not die for things they know are not true. They don't do it. 11 out of 11. And you know what's crazy? Some of these were his own brothers. Raise your hands in here. How many of y'all got brothers? How many of y'all got brothers? Put them up high. Don't be ashamed. It's okay. How many of you, keep your hands up if you wrote a worship song to your brother or about your brother? A worship song. Yeah, none of you. Put your hands down. If you did, you're lying. These very brothers of Jesus, like, can you imagine your brother coming up to you one day and be like, behold, I am the Son of God. You'd be like, bro, you the son of something, but it ain't God. I'll tell you that much. You know what I'm saying? Like, imagine his own brothers bow before him, died because they saw that his brother was king. I love how Japanese writer Shusaku Endo writes. It says, if you don't believe in the resurrection, you'll be forced to believe that what hit the disciples was some other amazing event, different in kind, yet with equal force and electrifying intensity. If we try to explain the changed lives of the early Christians, we may find ourselves making leaps of faith as great as if we believed in the resurrection itself. What she's saying is you could try and explain away that these disciples, there was something magnificent that hit it, but you're going to be making the same levels of faith leaps as those of us who believe in this resurrection. You see, the reality is we live in a world where many people think, if I'm being honest, that there's many roads to this life, to heaven, to this road. And I'm going to show you some pictures. I'm going to be honest here. The first picture, every year, Buddhists from around the world gather in Sri Lanka to see a Temple of the Tooth. And thousands of people travel to see the Temple of the Tooth because part of the body of the Buddha is buried there. And they want to see the spot where the founder of their religion is laid to rest. They know he's there. Part of them, they want to see it. This next picture in China, the tomb of Confucius. Thousands who practice Confucianism, they come to this exact spot because supposedly this is where the body of the founder of their religion is laid to rest. The next photo, the mosque of the Prophet in Medina. Every year, millions and millions of Muslims come to this place where the founder of their religion, Muhammad, the prophet, where he is laid to rest, and they know exactly where he is. This next picture, the Garden Tomb of Jerusalem. Many people believe that this is relatively the location where Jesus raised from the dead. Can I tell you, this is the only tomb that's famous for what's not in it. The only tomb. It's the only grave that's famous for what's not there, y'all. Like, you gonna roll up there, there ain't nothing in there. It's the only one that's famous for what's not in there. That there is a real Jesus that died on a real cross for the real you, and he wants to give you real life. Real life. Am I saying that all other religions are wrong? No, I'm not saying that. Jesus is. He says, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. He says it. And can I be honest? If he's the only one who got up out that grave, I'm with him. I don't care. I'm like, if he's the only one that got up, if he's the only one that's not there, I'm with him. Jesus says that did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and enter into his glory? He said, I had to do this. This was part of the plan. Because of the sin of the world and sin of humanity, I had to do this because God is just. But God is just, so the payment for sin had to be made. But God is love, so he made that payment himself. He made it himself. He doesn't want you to have to pay anything. Guess what? You ain't got enough money to do it. You ain't got enough good works. Watch when someone wrongs you. All of a sudden, that good standing you had that day. Watch when someone cuts you off. Watch when your kids don't listen to you by 10 a.m. Watch when you see the browser history of your spouse. Watch. When Jesus hangs on the cross, he cries out in English, his final words there, "It is finished." In the Greek, this word is tetelestai. And this word was used in 3 ways. It was used in a business context on ancient receipts in the New Testament times, and it would indicate that the debt had been paid in full. So you get a receipt, it's been paid in full. The second time it was used, it was in a judicial context in court when a particular sentence was fully served, not partially served, not halfway served, fully served. Tetelestai, we have served this sentence. And then the third time it was used in a military context, meaning in a battle, meaning that the battle had been won, there had been victory. Tetelestai. Here, when Jesus hangs on the cross and he yells tetelestai, he is declaring that the debt of your sin and my sin is fully paid. He is declaring that the judgment that you and I should have had for our sin has been fully served, and the spiritual war against death, sin, and Satan, it's been completely won because the grave is empty. The tomb is empty. And my fear is that many of you think that you are finished, that the credits are rolling on your life, and you come to church and you think that we are just a bunch of good people looking at you as a bad person saying, well, you really need this because of how messed up you are. And can I tell you, like, there's certain religions in the world and definitely politics who wants to divide the world into good and bad people. But can I tell you what the good news of Jesus does? The good news of the gospel, it divides the world from bad people and Jesus. And guess what? All of us are on the bad people's side. And the reason we need this great exchange because Jesus is holy. He's not like us. He's done nothing wrong. He's always been perfect. And he says, you know what? If you put your faith in me, I went to the cross. I got nailed. I got whipped. I got flogged. They dug that thorn crown in my scalp. And I did it because I was thinking of exchanging this for you. The good news of Jesus. So we don't look at you here if you don't follow him like you are bad. We recognize our own faults. We recognize our own shortcomings. But can I tell you, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. It says he was pierced for our transgressions, our wrongdoings. But can I tell you some good news? In Romans 8, verse 11, it says, if the spirit of him who raised Jesus from the dead is living in you, he who raised Jesus from the dead will also give life to your mortal bodies because of the spirit that's in you. The good news of Easter, that it is not a one-hit wonder, y'all. We get to live and believe in the spirit that raised Jesus from the dead, and it can raise the thing in your life. It can transform the addiction. It can transform your life for the sake of Jesus getting glory. So I told you about the movie that I saw. And the reason why I was feeling some type of way, if I'm being honest, it was Avengers Infinity War. I don't know if you've seen that movie. I'm about to give it away, so I apologize. You should have seen it by now. But here's the reality. All of a sudden, I noticed that Thanos, the whole movie, he's winning. Like, my favorite character after favorite character is perishing. All of a sudden, Spider-Man. Perishing. The Guardians of the Galaxy, perishing. Y'all, they got my boy T'Challa. They got my boy. That one got me. I had tears. I'm not gonna lie, because I'm like, really? He died in real life. Y'all gonna make him die right here? At least do something better. I'm like, y'all could have sent Hawkeye. He could have been out. Ain't nobody care about him. But T'Challa, Black Panther, y'all wrong. I was feeling some type of way because that's not how superhero movies end. They don't end in defeat and perishing. So I'm ready to get up out of the seat, and a teenage boy got to tell me, sit down, there's another scene. And the other scene comes up, and it's Nick Fury. And, I still don't know why he's still in these movies or what he does, but he's paging someone as he's perishing. And then the scene cuts and this picture shows up on the screen and everyone's cheering. They're going crazy. Like, oh my gosh. I'm like, now I got to talk to the teenage boy. I'm like, bro, what is that? Who is that? Who is that? Is that Superman? What is that? He's like, it's Captain Marvel. I'm like, okay, who was Captain Marvel? And what that scene did for people in that room was it gave them hope. I'm here to tell you today that the credits have rolled on Jesus' life. 3 days later, y'all, he got up. There's an empty tomb. The credits may look like they're rolling on your life, but the scene is not going to be Captain Marvel. It's going to be King Jesus. And the King Jesus has an empty tomb. So today, you could be met with hope. Your life could be transformed if you would put your faith in him, because there is another scene if you would just stay beyond the credits. Please stay beyond the credits, because the scene is an empty tomb and his name is Jesus.